Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here this evening, this morning, or this afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Tonight is the second interview in our series of interviews with many different international coaches to share their philosophy and their insights about coaching. And tonight we have the privilege of hosting Coach Christi Byerly from France, although originally she grew up in the United States of America. She holds an MCC credential from the International Coaching Federation, and she is the founder and the CEO of Awaken Coach Institute. Christi is also a trainer. She's trained hundreds of coaches since 2014, and she's also mentored many coaches in training. However, she still maintains a thriving coaching practice, and she's been coaching professionally since 2009 after she graduated from the International Coach Academy. Just before we start, let me just share the structure of our session this evening and how we will allow you to participate. We're going to start with a conversation between me and Christi, and that will be followed by an open Q&A session. Welcome, Coach Christi.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here with us this evening. And I think I really want to jump in. And the first question that I'm really interested in is, how did you decide on becoming a coach?
Well, it's kind of a long journey because when I was first married and living in Washington, D.C., almost 30 years ago, I took a course. It was kind of the classic, what color is your parachute? What are you good at? Find your ikigai kind of stuff. And coaching didn't exist yet as a profession. And so all the what came out of all these assessments that I did was that I should be either a teacher or a counselor. And so I looked at those two options and I thought, they're almost, but they're not quite, because I really don't want to spend a lot of time grading papers and preparing lesson plans. Like if I could just teach, that would be fun, but there's so much around it. And then looking at counseling, quite honestly, I was just like, I don't know if I want to listen to people's problems all day long. I'm such a forward looking person naturally. I'm always dreaming and imagining about the future, and which can be a blessing and a curse. I could do well to stay more in the present. So I looked at those two things, and they were both kind of almost, but it wasn't until I had done 15 years of corporate work in communications that I went through a burnout. And I had a friend of mine in Paris who had just finished, she was finishing her coach training, and she needed to give 10 hours of pro bono coaching to someone. And so she picked me as her guinea pig. And by the end of the 10 sessions, I knew that signing a renewal contract for 2 more years at the company I was working was not a good idea for my health. I knew that I wanted to sell my house, move to Kenya, have a third child. Like there was just so much that became clear to me just through talking for 10 hours that I thought, wow, this is a really cool thing to do. So it really started with me being coached. And then a few years later, I was living in Kenya, and there was a Canadian coach named Suzanne Stevens, who's a wonderful person. And she came down and she had a group of coaches from different countries in Africa. And somehow I got chosen to join that small group meeting. And she just asked 3 simple questions. And she stayed silent almost the whole time. She just asked her question and then listened. And the 8 of us went around and said our answers. And it was such a powerful experience. And I still remember her questions. It was just, what do you want that you haven't started yet? What's holding you back? And what are you going to do next? I thought, these are such easy questions, and she's doing nothing. Like, she's just sitting there listening. And yet all of us were in tears. We all knew things that we didn't know that we knew. And so for me, the answers to the questions were, I would like to become a coach. What's holding me back is that I have a voice in my head from the past saying, who do you think you are to be giving anyone advice or to be an expert or, putting yourself on a pedestal? And what are you going to do next? I said, I'm going to sign up for coaching school. And so I had already been kind of playing around with it and doing research on which schools I wanted to try. And I hadn't quite purchased the course because I wasn't even aware that this who do you think you are voice was there. But once I recognized it, I thought, that's no reason to not do what I love. I would never want somebody to hold themselves back because of that. And so I went to the course page of my favorite school that I had been looking at, and they happened to be having a 50% off for Africa that week. And so I clicked purchase, and that was exciting and scary because we didn't even have real fiber optics back then. And so to take my course, I was sitting out under a laundry line in this grassy field surrounded by cows. And so I would get on, I think it was like teleconference calls back in the day. There was no Zoom, there wasn't even Skype yet. And so it was just calling in. And so if I sat on this college campus with a line of sight to the library where there was this tower with internet connection, then I could just kind of sit in this wet grass surrounded by cows and take my courses. And people would, is somebody with cows here taking this course? And that was me. So that's how I got started.
Now that's a wonderful story. I sometimes see, especially with young coaches starting off today, they arrive at the first day of training and they are already an executive coach. They've already made up their mind. And it is interesting because I see with a lot of career coaches that they have this journey that they go on in becoming a coach. Let me maybe ask you then, if you look at the coaching that you do today, what is your purpose as a coach?
My life purpose is to create communities of grace. And that is so clear to me. And so anytime that I get an opportunity to create a community of grace, I know that I'm making the right decision. And so teaching coaches at Awaken Coach Institute is one of my core ways that I do that on a daily basis. Also, my beloved community groups. And it was funny because when I started out, I was pretty sure that I was going to be a career coach. I had my own life experiences of, I worked in the nuclear energy industry. And so I was almost always the only woman in the room and when I would go to meetings and things. And so I had quite a passion for women using their voice, women speaking up, women negotiating for their next promotion and all of that. And so that's what I kind of envisioned for myself before I started taking coach training. And I still think those are valuable pursuits. But what happened is the month that I started coach training was the month that I finally forgave someone in my life for some abuse that happened. And so I ended up becoming the forgiveness coach for quite a few years. And that was really, really fulfilling. And now that I'm, some years later down the road, I still love coaching people for forgiveness. And I wrote an ebook about it, which I just recently put up for free on my website, because I still, all stages of the journey are still so valuable. But what I would say I do now is I help people to be really gracious to themselves. And so a lot of that is from the NLP training. Some of it is from Brene Brown's organization, who I studied with for a couple of years. And it's really just learning to love yourself the way you are right now, not waiting to be better before you start giving yourself a lot of kindness and compassion and recognition. And so with my coaching, often what happens is we do a lot of integration work of both dark and light, and making sure that you don't just love the parts of yourself that are easy to love, but you kind of go toward the parts of yourself that are harder to love and learn to bring a whole lot of compassion and kindness to that.
Do you want to maybe give us a little bit of an insight in how you would encourage someone to look towards the darkness and accept that?
I heard a story which I really loved. There's an old lion sitting in the grass, and its teeth are crumbled away. It's lost its power. It can't even run anymore. It can just lie in the grass. But the power it has remaining is that it can roar very loudly. And so when it sees a herd of gazelle out there on the savannah, all the young lions are out ready to circle and pounce. And so as soon as the younger lions are there in all their power, ready to leap on their prey, the old lion gives its biggest, loudest, toothless roar. And the gazelles leap to their death by running away toward the lions that still have all their teeth. And so sometimes it's just being the gazelle who turns and runs straight toward the lion's roar that actually saves you.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. Let me maybe then just jump in, since we learn about the strength of the lion, and let me maybe ask you a more personal question. What is it about, what is it that you are passionate about coaching, or why is it that you are very passionate about coaching?
I think some of it is from my own wounding, and times that I've felt not part of things, felt other, felt foreign, strange, different, misfit, all of those things. And so I think that's what drives my passion for community in particular. And I remember when I had maybe coached for 2 or 3 years, and I was still doing mainly one-on-one coaching. And there was a beautiful woman who, just a lovely person. I'm still in contact with her even now this week. And she came to my office and she told me a story that she said, I've never told anyone this before. Not her husband, not her best friend, no one. And then a few days later, a friend of hers, her best friend, who neither one of them knew that I was coaching the other, came in and told me another story. And she told me the same thing. I've never said this to anyone. And recognizing that these two amazing people were not able to share with each other is what got me really passionate about creating communities of grace, because I knew that, I would be gone. I wasn't in their lives on a daily basis. They would come for their sessions. They would make huge strides, of course. It was very exciting. And I wanted people to build communities around themselves where they felt loved and belonging for exactly who they are right now. And so I invited those women and some other women to join me for group coaching. And that has just been the joy of my life, to have groups of people who can come together and we all set our intentions for the learning. Maybe one or two people get coached in the group, and everyone receives a gift. Everyone takes something away, because when one person is courageous, we're all courageous. We all benefit from when we see someone else getting stronger and growing and being more honest and being more brave. And so that's what I get really passionate about, is when people can look around them, be in a group and say, I'm okay and you're okay, and it's good to be here together.
In our conversation that we had before this evening, you also mentioned the aspect of coaching presence. What does that mean for you?
Coaching presence to me is pure love. And I think it's really important for the coach to begin by loving him or herself really well, and treating myself really well. So even this time period that we've picked for this conversation is a bit later for me than is optimal for my brain. It's 7 to 9 p.m. here in France, and I'm not really a night owl. I get up early in the morning. And so I took a nap and I went for a walk, and I did some things before coming here. I got very nicely hydrated and just did the things that make it so that I can come here with my full presence with you right now, having given myself the kindness and the love that I need to be able to then be present for each person who's here in the room. And hopefully everyone who's here in the room and people watching feel that they are loved in the presence of the two of us, and feel that no matter what's going on in your life right now, that you are okay right now showing up here.
We also talked a little bit about your philosophy of coaching, and we got to the point where you're talking about coaching from a point of spirituality, or coaching for spirituality. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. And I noticed somebody in the chat earlier asked about NLP. And so I want to give credit to Robert Dilts for his very elegantly designed double pyramid structure, which I use as the foundation for what I do in my coaching. And so I normally ask very few questions about people's environment. They're in a certain culture and a context, and the people around them and all of that. And so that's certainly important, and it does come in later in that double pyramid structure. But I'm listening at 6 levels within the person themselves. So once we get beyond the environment, I'll just say it briefly. I think there's probably people who know NLP. So I'm looking for what is my client's behavior, the behavior often being just a reflection of their beliefs. What are their capacities, emotions, etc.? What are the thoughts going through their head? And so that those three levels are kind of the above the waterline, what you'd see in CBT kind of therapies or whatever, where you can change your thoughts, and that means you can change your feelings and change your behaviors. And those three kind of go together as a three-legged stool. But then there's another three layers that are kind of a reflection of those that are under the surface. And those are what must be true for this person in order to be behaving in that way, how they're doing it with the thoughts they have. And so looking at the structures of their beliefs, how they're related to their values hierarchy, if there's any hiccups in the way the values hierarchy is structured. And then below that, what are the identity level beliefs? Who do you think you are? Who do they think they are? And how does that show up? Often those who do you think you are identity questions are reflected in the emotions, the strong emotions. So I think for a lot of new coaches, they can get alarmed by big emotions. And for me, I love big emotions. They're just data, and they're often the gateway into those identity beliefs. And so that I like to always say, okay, behavior is a reflection of beliefs about maybe possibilities, etc. Strong emotions are often a reflection of identity beliefs. And then your thoughts are often a reflection of your spiritual beliefs. And by spiritual, I'm really just talking about your purpose, your mission. What are you part of that's bigger than you? How are you part of this community of grace that everyone is invited into at all times around the planet? And so then once we've got those, that alignment internally, what we normally see happen is that it gets reflected out. I mean, it's Gandhi's famous quote, be the change you want to see in the world. And I do believe that when you change inside, you become a blessing, which is what you already are when you're in the self. And so then you start seeing really wonderful, bigger and bigger ripple effects from the internal alignment, then that goes out into the world. So I guess that's one of the underlying philosophies that's core to the way I do my coaching.
Maybe let's just change direction a little bit. And what I would like to ask you is, what is the niche of clients that you most enjoy working with?
I call my people international spiritual world changers. And I think they know who they are. They're often people, well, they're people a lot like me, I guess, people who've maybe left their own country to go to a different place because they have gone beyond maybe a particular nationality or a particular religion, and they're wanting to do world work that really is a gift and a blessing where they are. And often what I find is that, similar to me, the people that I work with are just trying too hard. They're holding up the sky. There's this, the weight of the world. They want so badly to fix and change and make things better. And they do not like injustice. They want inclusion. They want diversity. They want everyone to be invited to the dance. And yet there can be this weight of, it's on me to do it. And so I find that a lot of my coaching is about letting people just be, that you naturally are going to have a positive effect on the world just by being yourself, and we're all in it together. So it's not the job of any one of us to become the Messiah or to graduate into being an angel or something else, but the more human you are and the more yourself you are, the more real you are, the more you can participate in the gift that we are to each other. Just looking at my next cohort coming up in September, it's just so thrilling to see, someone from Tanzania, someone from Kenya, someone from India, someone from Thailand, someone from the UK. Just to me, it's heaven on earth. I mean, that's what true spirituality is when people can come. And there's an application form because I only allow people into my program if they can say a resounding yes to I will love each person in this group exactly the way they are right now. And I will never try to fix or change anyone. Because I think a lot of coaches come in thinking they're going to change the world or change someone else. And I'm here to change me. I'm here to do my work and be who I want to be in the world.
Mhm.
And the rest is, up to each person to take responsibility. And so I think when you start with that bedrock of, I'm going to love you the way you are right now, and I'm going to do my best to do the same for myself. I think it's often harder to do that for myself than for other people. It's just a beautiful way to start any relationship, but especially in a group where people are wanting to learn and grow.
If we talk about your coaching process, and there's two aspects that I'm really interested in, because if I think about coaching, there's the journey that I'm taking my client through, and then there's the journey that I myself go through. What would be your insights on those kinds of processes, or any other kind of process that you see occurring in the coaching journey?
It's so interesting because each journey is so unique and different, and yet there are some common threads that I would say run through them. And so to me, anytime you want to make the world a more brave and loving place, and you're going to become your brave and loving self, the first thing that happens is getting very clear on your own values. And so for me, it's community and grace. That's so clear. I know I'm making the right decision anytime I'm moving toward those things. And choosing those values wisely, making sure they're love-based values and not fear-based values is really important. And so that's this is who I am. This is my unique contribution to the world. Then another piece that I often see coming up is community. And so if you want to be brave, you need to have yourself and at least one other person who will have your back when you mess up. Because we all will, especially if we're doing something that's out of our comfort zone, different from, when you grow and change, your community can push back. People who get healthy healthier than the people around them. It's not always comfortable. And so a lot of times what I do is I'm encouraging people to get your grounded confidence, get a lot of self-kindness, get a lot of love for yourself as a human being, and find at least one other person who will be there with you when times get tough. And so it's the values, the community, and then just getting clear on what you want your contribution to be. And that can kind of come in at any stage. And so there's this integration that I do because I did ICF, obviously, a lot of ICF training to get to the MCC. But I also did master level NLP, and I did Brene Brown's, Daring Greatly, Gifts of Imperfection, Rising Strong, Dare to Lead. All of those trainings, which really influence how I coach. And then I also studied 2 years of spiritual direction with the Jesuits. And so, boy, did that mess with my mind. I mean, I used to have all these grids, and you'd learn, like, there's the 7 stages of growth according to this person, and the 6 stages of whatever according to that person, and the 6 levels of listening with NLP, and on, and everybody's got their frameworks and everything. And so I like being able to pull from a variety of things, but I think just valuing yourself, getting your people around you. The structure of an actual coaching conversation with me, which I think maybe where your question was going, I use the ICF kind of overall structure, which is kind of, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so the beginning of the conversation, which is in some ways similar to an NLP intake process, is just, what do you want? How will you know if the conversation is successful? To what extent it's successful? How are you going to measure that? How is this part of the bigger picture in your life? What makes it so important to you to talk about now? So those kinds of questions all come in the beginning, setting the coaching agreement. Then the middle part of the conversation, as we all know, it gets very messy, but in general, I'll be listening at the 6 levels, potentially doing, an NLP activity or intervention, although I would say that probably happens maybe 1 out of every 3 or 4 sessions. Or maybe it'll just be 1 or 2 questions taken from one of the techniques or frameworks. And then the wrap up is just asking people those nitty-gritty questions about, imagine yourself a little bit into the future. You're in this situation. What do you do? How do you do it? When, where, with whom? Those more focused and directed questions that bring maybe the spiritual revelation or aha from the middle part into an actual, this is how it's going to be lived out in my life over time after the session is done. So that's, I guess, the structure of my conversation. And then it's that middle messy part that you never know what's going to show up there. It could be drawing, it could be dancing, it could be walking across a room on pieces of paper. I mean, you just never know what might happen, but it'll become clear depending on what level of listening the shift is wanting to happen.
I like the middle messy part because that is where possibilities are created. But I like that you were very clear about the requirement for courage. Another thing that stood out for me is when you were talking about the different techniques and picking a question from here, picking a question from there. And I personally believe that it's very, very important for coaches to go and learn from many different disciplines, because it's
Absolutely.
those disciplines that eventually will clarify into your own unique approach with the client.
And I'm a reader, so not everyone is. Sometimes people, like podcasts. I'm not a very auditory person, and so I struggle to stay awake for no matter how good the podcast is.
Yeah.
But man, I can read, Aaron Beck's 1,500 pages, and I can get into psychology, and Carl Rogers is a huge person for me, and I just really love reading even from other disciplines, and you can pick up a lot of things like just about how the world works and how people work, and using those insights almost immediately in the coaching. You can just start seeing there's just so many patterns that you see with people over time that this is how people are, and it gives a sense of confidence as a coach.
Let me maybe ask you also, how do you prepare for a coaching conversation?
Well, I'm a really kinesthetic person, so a lot of it is about my body. And it was not fun for me for a while there during COVID, because I was having about 8 hours per day on Zoom, and I was getting headaches and feeling unwell. It was, I would not recommend that people do that. But so what I started doing is, I have it open right now, actually. So today I've had four coaching conversations of an hour each, which is really optimal for me. I love that. And I still get some lower back stiffness and pain if I'm just sitting in this particular chair for 4 hours. And so I have what I call my Wholehearted Living collection on Spotify. And I have, and I like doing 5 rhythms dancing. So 5 rhythms dancing, it's actually 5 different of the strong emotions that people can have. And so anything that comes up for me during a session, often I'll have maybe 5 to 10 minutes between sessions. And so I go through my Wholehearted Living, and I've got, the big emotions, I've got bravery songs, and I have a dance party between sessions. It's almost like, if you have a little sorbet between courses in a fine French restaurant. Haven't done that in a while, but it's like getting that sorbet refresher, clear the palate. And so if there was some grief, or if there was some joy, or if there was some anger, or whatever happened in the previous session, I dance it out. And then usually go hydrate. I usually make sure I take a good bio break, get enough water, and always got my water here with a little splash of cranberry juice in it. And yeah, I just prepare my body. I think being in my body, moving my body, hydrating it, being really kind to it is a huge help. So it's less even about the client, I would say, than an openness in myself to receive whatever wants to happen. And so then usually what I'll also do is, 3-4 minutes before the conversation starts, I'll open up our shared Google document and just do a quick scan of, this is what we talked about before. This is potentially what they might, want to be celebrating as we start the call. And then I want to have that cleansed palate so that I can really match the person's physiology when they show up for the call and see, they showed up excited and smiling, but do I see a little something underneath? And just being very aware of what's going on with them from the first breath of the call.
If you think back from that moment when you hit that 50% off button until today, what has been the impact of coaching on you as a human being?
It can't even be described or stated. I don't know. I mean, it's just been a different core state. I think thinking of my energy and anxiety levels that I had 10 years ago is very different than it is now. My ability to regulate and be kind to myself is different. And it's not that it's always super steady, but I would say, like, if I was going here and would have really big dips or a lot of energy, it was coming from this level. Whereas I just feel that now the ability to stay longer and longer in peace and joy is just more constant. And then I still, of course, we all have the ups and downs, but it's from a very different baseline. And I would say that has changed who I spend time with. The people that are around me are very different people than they were 10 years ago. And I hope that I have love for everybody at all stages of, if people want to be having conversations about politics and stuff, really getting in awful fights on the internet or whatever, that I don't need to have a lot of judgment about that, even though I still certainly can get triggered by it sometimes. But it feels more of just transcending some of the ugly that goes on. And I remember my sister came and visited me a couple of years ago, and we grew up in a small village in the woods, and the women that we knew had very limited options. And I think a lot of my family members are still in that world. And so when my sister came to visit me, and she spent a couple of months with me, and she was just like, oh my gosh, you're surrounded by greatness every day. Like, your friends are coaches, your friends, a lot of them are women business owners who have done, I can't even tell you how stretching being an entrepreneur is. Putting yourself out there is, this is what I stand for. This is who I am. This is what is okay and what's not okay with me in my groups. This is who I'm inviting in and who I'm not. Getting that kind of clarity, that's the kind of people that I spend a lot of my time with, especially in the Brene Brown community. We have an online group on Facebook, and we all just champion each other. We can all say when things are awful, and we always are awkward, brave, and kind, as Brene says. We just are living our full catastrophe living, as John Kabat-Zinn would say. And so I don't get into these drama triangles so much. The caliber of people who are actually doing their work it just feels like such a great gift to have those kinds of people regularly in my life. And I don't think I even recognized how much a part of my life that was until my sister came, and she's like, I've never even met one woman like the kind of women that you have in your life, like 4 or 5 of them every day, these conversations about being brave. And it's just it's normal. It's people who are going off on their hero's journey and doing it. So everything's different, I would say.
I'm glad you also mentioned the hero's journey, because what is interesting, if you think about the hero's journey, when you go through the journey of transformation, there's a point where you have to either re-enter the world that you came from, or you have to connect with the new world that you want to be a part of. The question that comes up for me, if we start talking about that, is inevitably, when you go through a transformation like that, the kind of transformation you described, there's also a point at which you have to let go. Now, and it's not only letting go of places and things, it's also sometimes letting go of people. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, and I don't want to tell too many other people's stories. I would just say that it can be a very long view. That, I think there's that maybe cliche, like if you love someone, let them go, and if they were yours, they'll return to you, and if they're not, they're flap. And my experience has been that sometimes people leave for a very long time. And so I think part of the forgiveness process is just seeing reality and saying, this is what happened. This is how this person behaves now. These are my boundaries. This is how I'm going to love and care for the only person I'm really responsible for on the earth. This is the only body I was given. And so it's the only one I can really care for, other than the kids who came from this body. And that's a pretty big realization. And so then there can be people who have been in my life who aren't so much for now. And you never know. 5 or 10 years, I mean, that's a drop in the bucket. I've only been coaching since 2009, and I'm so different. Like, would my 2009 self have approved of my 2021 self? Probably not. She would be shocked and appalled by the way I live my life. It would be very scary for her. And so I can't expect anybody else in my life to be enthusiastically, supportive of the things that I do now. They're on their own journey. But I keep one artifact is always on my desk, and that is this pewter labyrinth. And I see Mary Ellen is loving the labyrinth. It's my favorite way to pray or meditate is when I can find a really big one, with rocks on the beach or something. But with the labyrinth, what happens is there's only one path. And when you start on the path, you can be the tiniest little baby. In 2 seconds, you've only gone through one twist and turn, and you're already at the center. And so you're so excited, and you feel like, oh, I've come so far. I've made it. I'm at the center. And then you continue your journey, and you go back and forth and back and forth. And boy, have you walked a very long pilgrimage, and you find yourself one step away from where you started, way flung out into the middle of God knows where, don't know where you are, but you're way farther on the journey than somebody who's here or who's here. But there's only one path. And so with the labyrinth, I can be going this way and you can be going that way. And we can think that, okay, so and so loves Biden and the other person loves Trump if you're American, and get very upset about that. But you know what? We're all going to have these twists and turns, and we're all on the journey. So it's just good to recognize that and say, yes, you appear, for people in your life who might not be accepting you or loving you right now, they could be on the journey. They're just at a little different place, going a little different direction, and we're all going to get to the center. And to just trust. It can take a while.
If a person comes to you and tells you they are interested in becoming a coach, what will you say to them? What kind of advice will you give them?
I would probably say the same things that I would ask in my application form for Awaken Coach Institute. Are you willing to be very brave and loving with your life? And are you willing to invest in loving and caring for yourself and doing, being on your own hero's journey? And are you willing to love and listen and accept everyone that you meet? And if not, do your own work until you can, but always be at the service of what's wanting to happen in people without ever trying to fix and change them. And so if you're willing to sign up for that, which is a huge ask, it's not easy work. It's so worth it. If you can say a resounding yes, then by all means, study coaching and use it every day of your life, whether you're a professional coach or you're using it as a leader or a parent or in any other way in your life.
Is there anything that you want to share with us that I haven't even thought to ask about?
Well, as I was going on my walk, I thought I remembered you telling me that you were going to ask me to share a practice that people could do. And so I actually think probably everyone in this room already has 50,000 practices that they've learned. And so I would just say, whichever ones it is for you, if it's breathing or walking or dancing or getting adequate nutrition or getting good sleep or any of the other foundational pillars or any techniques that you've learned that help you, just practice it regularly. I don't think any of us probably needs a lot of new ones. We just need to practice. Even if all you know how to do is breathe, do that.
Make any practice a habit.
Yes.
Okay, so let me open the floor, and if anyone has a question, just put up your hand for me. Mary Ellen has got a question.
It's actually more of a comment than a question. And I really appreciated what you shared with us about how you prepare yourself between clients. I think oftentimes, whether we're coaching or facilitating, we forget about self prep and taking care of ourselves. So thank you so much for that. That was very important to me, and I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Christi, you might not know it since you've not met the audience before, but there's a lot of labyrinth lovers in this.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Yes.
Shoko, you have a question?
Yes. So, Christi, thank you so much. I'm a relatively new coach. I'm moving from the corporate to the coaching business right now. And my question to you is that how do you sort of, finish or end the coaching relationship? In other words, that I have a client, so she finished the a certain number of a coaching package, and then she's keep purchasing it, which is great. But I do feel that there's a certain point there must be sort of I should say, it's I don't know how to sort of end it. In other words, that what would be the goal? In other words, that to finish that coaching relationship in a sense, that because I see some people just so heavily rely on the coach, and is that healthy?
Yeah, thank you. I remember the first few years that I was coaching, I had this belief that if somebody rehired me, that it was somehow a failure, or that there was dependency being created, or that I was kind of babysitting them. However, as a coach, I always have a coach, always. And I have always had a coach for at least the last 10 years. And some coaches come into my life for a period, for a specific goal. Other coaches stay in my life for several years. But I think if you believe in the power of coaching, then you always have a coach. And I think it's really lovely when coaches have coaches, because we really do continue to progress and be more brave and more loving and remember who we are when we have that presence of love and listening, and with a really grounded person in our lives. And so after some time, I just let go of that belief. And now I have clients, some of them stay with me for 5 years. Some of them stay with me for a 6-month contract, and then 10 years later, they sign on again. Some people join a community group and then later on take a coach training course. And so what I would say for ending relationships is if your client is continuing to benefit from your kind presence in their life, then by all means let them continue on with you. And what I do is, when I set up a contract, I take very few VIP one-on-one clients anymore. I take one per month, and they always stay with me for a full year. Just because the kind of coaching that I do, I feel that that's a good rhythm that seems to work for people, to make that depth of transformation. And so at the 11-month mark, or like maybe if you had a package of 6 sessions, it would be the second to the last session. You want to already prepare for the final session. And so you want to ask them to be clear about what they would like to do moving forward, to what extent they've met the initial goals that you set out in the agreement, and what are their next steps. And I recommend always having an alumni package. And in that last session, the most important message that you can give to the person is that I love you, I believe in you, and you're so important to me. Make sure that they know that and they feel that, and that they know you're not going anywhere, and that you will always remember them and know them and love them. And so they're totally at choice always. And so are you. I mean, if you feel like, I'm not liking this so much anymore, I think you'd be better with a different coach, just say it very honestly. But they're at choice. If they want to hire you again, wonderful. So a lot of my people will, maybe they've kind of done a big life shift in that first year, and then they'll sign up for an alumni pack of 3 sessions that they can use over the course of the following year. Or maybe they'll come and do a training program or become part of a community. But just the principle is kindness and service to that person. And they actually are a human being who is going to grow and change for the rest of their life. Even if they had a dramatic change in a short period of time, nobody's done. Their labyrinth is going to continue while they have breath in their lungs. So that's my opinion. How does that land with you, Shoko?
Oh, thank you. Yes. Thank you so much. That really makes sense. And I also just thinking about my own coaches. I have a few people because that's continuously, I'm learning continuously in the different items that I'm really working on. So that really makes sense. And I think, kindness and serve the clients, it's really resonating in me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Christi, thank you so much for your valuable insights. I really connected and paced with you as you were speaking. It was so lovely. Listening to Shoko's question on how a coaching process ends for the client and for us with the client, and you mentioning love, I remember one of my psychotherapists, because we also do psychotherapeutical work with ourselves in the coaching process, so we can keep ourselves fresh and reset. And I remember her saying, actually, the therapeutical process is a never-ending process for either the therapist and the client. So I feel the same also with coaching. But then listening to you mentioning love and thinking of how personal this word is for people, some of them may get scared of this idea of being loved by their coach or having to love their coach. Some of them don't. Of course, there's also the chemistry, but not as far as love is concerned. So probably not that far. I was thinking maybe you can share with us what is your idea of love and how exactly do you frame love in terms, in actual words with a client, or maybe you have a ritual, and how you frame it in such a way that they don't feel the need to be loved or the need to give love back, maybe just feeling the constraint or something. So how do you frame love in a way that people feel free to be loved?
Yeah, I would say love is the core state. It's a very grounded sense of okayness that is the underlying river of life available to everyone at all times. And so it's not even necessarily that personal. And what I like to call the coaching relationship, I call it loving disinterest. Because you love the person in the sense that I always want the best for you, no matter what. And so it's both an action and a feeling. It's, I want what's best for you, and I will actively show up on time, give my full self, be present, etc. I will do the actions that show that I love you. And I will feel affection for you. And even in leadership research, bosses who do not feel affection for their employees are not good bosses to them. And it's much kinder to send them to another boss, put them on a different team, than to keep someone in your care that you don't actually feel affection for. And so if you're doing corporate and executive coaching or whatever, you may or may not use the word love with your client if it's appropriate, but we know what it is, right? We know how to behave in loving ways and how to feel true affection for the person. And the reason I call it loving disinterest is because it takes a certain challenge, because we love the person. We don't have any interest or attachment to the outcomes. But what we want is to be in the coaching presence of a love state at all times in a session and whenever we're even thinking about our client. So then the language you use, I don't even know that you need to use language other than showing by your words and deeds that you are important to me. I want what's best for you, and I'm willing to listen, say the challenging things, be the presence that is needed for your growth to happen. And who doesn't love that? I mean, they might not like you every minute, but love is a deep sense of okayness that cannot be altered. It's just the way it is. That's how I frame it. How does that land with you, Noella?
Yeah, this reminds me of unconditional acceptance in my reality, and also reminds me. I don't think it was Brené Brown's TED Talk, but there was a TED Talk. I think it was a male speaker emphasizing that the opposite of fear is not bravery, courage, but love.
Yes.
So yes. I totally resonate with this idea of showing love and sharing love and being there out of our free will and supporting one another. So thank you so much.
Yes, love and choice are so related. I mean, you can't have love without freedom and vice versa. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I realized that, keep being a good coach or even try to be better coach. There's a lot of, I wouldn't call it a requirement, but a continuous coaching education. I was amazed that I have vigorous, and you have to have a certain rigor to doing that. Do you have any advice to keep learning, and what kind of things that keep learning?
I just love learning, and it is one of the ICF coaching competencies, and it's also a requirement. We renew our credentials every 3 years. Mm-hmm. And so every 3 years you do at least a minimum of 40 more hours of continuous education. And I must say, I don't always enjoy the emotion of disgust, but I did feel a lot of disgust for a person who told me that he got all 40 of his continuous coaching hours in by cheating his way through class, just putting the code in at the beginning and end of the class and pretending he had been there. And I just thought, why would anyone want to pretend they learned something when they could actually learn something? So I mean, the ICF chapters have tons of free resources, just book recommendations. I think I tend to go overboard with the, I'm always taking classes. Right now I'm going through the ORSC training, which I love, the organizational and relationship systems coaching course, which has just been so enjoyable. A couple weeks ago, I did NLP New Code course in Portugal. I just am so interested. I want to do more somatic coaching and learn more about dance and yoga and coaching, and I want to learn from people who use horses and I mean, just there's so much. And so I would just say, if it interests you, just stay curious and just keep on learning whatever feels like it's fun and exciting for what you want to, first for yourself, but also for your clients. What would you love to change in your life?
Thank you. That's very inspirational. And also that I keep taking a lot of courses, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it, and then realize that there's no ending. And I just like, oh my God, this is just, in Japanese we call it the way, like tea ceremony or any martial arts. There's no ending. It's the way to do things.
Yes.
So I feel like a coach is exactly the same.
The way you may have your black belt or whatever the highest belt is, and in your line of training, and yet with each day that you live, you can always learn and grow from every conversation, everyone you meet. Thank you, Shoko.
I think maybe this is also a good place to bring this conversation to an end. From myself, and I'm very sure from the people that attended this evening, thank you very much for all of your insights, Christi, and thank you for giving us this time. It is really much appreciated.
Thank you so much.